Hi, I'm USA Today bestselling author Jennifer Youngblood. Thanks for joining me for One Chapter a Day, The Clean Romance Way. Today, I'm going to be reading Chapter 16 of her Crazy Rich Fake Fiancé. Haven, Wyatt, and his family are off to do ding-dong ditching. You guys are going to love this chapter. It gets me right here. Okay, Chapter 16. Here we go. In retrospect, announcing to his dad and the family that he and Bryn were engaged probably wasn't the smartest move. The words had simply slipped out. When Wyatt saw Bryn's shocked expression, he backpedaled, urging her to just go along with it. The truth was, he wanted Bryn in his life. Always. Sooner or later, he'd have to break the news to her that he was serious when he told his dad he loved her. She was everything he'd always wanted and more. He glanced sideways at her, a jolt of warmth shooting through him when their eyes connected. When she smiled, he knew the definition of perfection. While Bryn wasn't perfect by any means, she was perfect for him. "Are we there yet?" Ellie asked from the back seat. "Almost." After they picked up their rental car, a silver Audi, they plugged in the address Ralph and Marguerite gave them and headed to their destination. It was in the country, 45 minutes outside Atlanta. The excitement in Wyatt picked up when they pulled onto a side road. According to the GPS, it should be around the next bend. "Your destination is on the right," the impersonal female voice on the GPS announced. Ellie sat up as the three of them looked at the faded white farmhouse sitting back from the road. They drove past it, on down the road so as not to arouse suspicion. Wyatt glanced in the rearview mirror as Ellie pulled a face. "Did you see that long driveway? How are we going to get the box to the house without anyone seeing us?" "I don't know," Wyatt admitted. He tried to think. The box was heavy and bulky, but if push came to shove, he could carry it. "I know you want to remain anonymous, but would it be the end of the world if someone saw us?" Bryn asked. "Yes," Wyatt and Ellie answered simultaneously. Wyatt held up a finger. "The first rule of Ding Dong Ditch is that you can't ever get caught." "Yep," Ellie piped in. "Dad drove that point home more times than we can count." They drove until the road ended. "What now?" Ellie asked. "We could park as close to the house as we can on the side of the road and walk through the field. That might be our only shot," Bryn said. Wyatt pursed his lips. "Good idea." "Ellie and I can help you carry the box," Bryn offered. Ellie grunted. "Speak for yourself." She flashed a wicked grin, knowing Wyatt would see her in the rearview mirror. "I say we let my big brother put his marvelous muscles to work." "Ha ha, funny," Wyatt said flatly, but he couldn't stop himself from beaming. He looked at Bryn, feeling deliriously happy. While he always enjoyed doing Ding Dong Ditch, having Bryn along made it thrilling. He found a spot to pull over. He clasped his hands together. "Y'all ready?" "Yes, sir," Ellie chirped. He looked at Bryn. "How about you?" A grin tipped her lips, her dark eyes sparkling. "Let's go." Carrying the box was harder than Wyatt thought. His biceps ached, the box seeming to grow heavier with every step. To make matters worse, the field was sopping wet and muddy. His feet sunk into the earth with every step. His breath was coming out in short puffs of mist against the freezing air. Wyatt willed himself to take in a deep breath, ignoring how the cold burned his lungs. Ellie was a few steps ahead, but Bryn stayed by his side. She cast him a concerned look. "Are you sure you don't need help carrying the box?" "Nope, got it," he quipped. Dang, this box was heavy. Wyatt pressed forward, ignoring the cold, ignoring his aching muscles. He was a mindless machine, moving forward. "Almost there," Bryn said, a note of encouragement in her voice. Finally, they reached the front porch. "Do you think anyone is home?" Bryn whispered. "Shh," Ellie warned, glancing back over her shoulder. As quietly as they could, Wyatt went up the steps. Each labored step sounded like an axe cracking through wood in his ears. He exhaled in relief when he put down the heavy box. He flexed his arms, grateful for the release. Time seemed to be suspended as Ellie looked at Wyatt and Bryn. Then she pressed the doorbell, and they sprinted off the porch. They made it to the edge of the yard when they heard a gunshot. "Stop where you are," a man ordered. "One more move, and I'll pump you so full of lead you'll be using your heads for pencils." Wyatt froze when he heard the cocking sound of a gun. Crap! He looked at Bryn and Ellie. Both were wide-eyed. "Hands up! Turn around!" Slowly they complied. A laugh gurgled in Wyatt's throat as they faced the guy with the gun. He was a little younger than Wyatt, with closely cropped brown hair. He was dressed in jeans and a sweatshirt, a savage expression on his face. "I knew I'd catch you eventually." "There must be some mistake," Wyatt said. Was the guy going to shoot them for leaving a box of Christmas gifts on his front porch? This was insane. He glanced at Bryn and Ellie. Both were petrified, their faces as pale as sand. No mistake, the guy countered, his eyes narrowing. You're the ones who've been stealing packages from the front porches. Well, you won't get away with it this time. I'm calling the cops. Great. First the treasure, now this. Wyatt could only imagine what the headlines would read. Charles Davenport II finds treasure and steals boxes from porches. No, we weren't stealing anything, Wyatt countered, keeping his voice even. We left you something, a gift, on your front porch. Hesitation crept into the guy's eyes. You're lying. I'm telling the truth. He locked gazes with the guy. If you don't believe me, check it out. I can name the contents. Good thing Marguerite told him the contents of their box. There's a ham, boxes of chocolate, a fruit basket, nuts, blankets, and scarves. There will be one wrapped box and an envelope. Keeping the gun trained on them, the guy backed up the steps and moved over to the box. He tore the brown wrapping and opened it, peering inside. Just because you guessed the contents doesn't mean you weren't trying to steal it, he said stubbornly. Wyatt's patience was growing thin. Come on, man, look at us. Do we look like thieves? I carried that box across the field. He looked down at his muddy feet. He's telling the truth, Bryn said. We were trying to deliver the box anonymously. The guy frowned, lowering his gun slightly. Why? It's something our family does every year, Ellie explained. We find people who are in need and try to help them. Her voice hardened. You should be thanking us instead of holding us at gunpoint. He lowered the gun. I'm sorry. We've had several packages stolen since Thanksgiving. When I saw you running, I assumed. He propped the gun against the rocking chair on the porch. I'm sorry, he said again, flashing a contrite smile. I feel like such a lapse. Come on in. I know my grandmother would love to meet you. He motioned at the box. It was so nice of you to think of us. Wyatt held up a hand. Thanks, but we need to be getting back. Well, at least tell me your names. Wyatt would have declined the request, reiterating that they preferred to remain anonymous, but Ellie spoke up. I'm Ellie Davenport, Shimochin. This is my brother Charlie and his fiancée, Bryn. The guy's jaw went slack. The Davenports, as in the Charles Davenport who owns Frontline Medical Supply? Yep, that's us, Ellie said. I interned at Frontline Medical Supply. He sucked in a quick breath, shaking his head. I didn't realize that Mr. Davenport even knew who I was. Well, evidently he knew you and knew you needed a helping hand, Ellie said. What's your name? He pushed a hand through his hair. Luke Calloway. Nice to meet you, Luke, Ellie responded in a friendly tone. Wyatt looked at Ellie, wondering why she was being so conversational. Then it hit him. She was interested in Luke. Please, come in, Luke urged. My grandmother would love to meet you. I'm excited to show her the gifts. All right, you talked us into it, Ellie said, as she bolted forward like a racehorse through the gate. Ellie, wait, Wyatt said, but his words fell on deaf ears. He looked at Bryn, who wore an amused smile. I think Ellie likes him, she whispered. That's the understatement of the century, he muttered. You'd think she'd have more sense than to just run into the house of a stranger who was pointing a gun at us a few moments ago. He reached for Bryn's hand as they walked toward the house. When they reached the porch, Ellie was already inside. Wyatt rolled his eyes as he and Bryn went in behind her. He noticed that Luke had left the gun outside, thankfully. As Bryn and Wyatt stepped into the home, Bryn looked around. The home's modest decor was a stark contrast to the grandeur of the Davenports' home. There was a small foyer leading to the living room. Ellie was already sitting on a love seat. An older woman sat in a forest green recliner, a pink afghan spread over her legs. Her silver hair was all one length and cropped just below her ears. She wore glasses with raised binocular-like circles in the center of each lens. Luke reached for a remote and turned off the TV. Then he went to the adjoining kitchen and brought back a chair. Come in and have a seat, he said, placing the chair between Ellie and the older woman. A second later, he sat down in it. Wyatt looked down at his muddy shoes. I hate to track on the floor. No worries, Luke said with a casual wave of his hand. It happens all the time. Wyatt and Bryn wiped off their feet as best as they could on the doormat, closing the front door behind them. They walked over and sat down on the worn tweed couch. They sank so deeply that Haven had the eerie feeling it was trying to swallow them whole. Luke motioned to the woman. This is my grandmother, Jules. The woman smiled. Hello. Sympathy tugged at Haven when she realized that the woman wasn't focusing on them. Rather, she was looking past them. She was blind, or partially blind. Haven guessed the telescopic circles helped magnify things to aid her sight. Grand has macular degeneration, Luke explained. I'm sorry, Wyatt said sincerely. Luke swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing up and down. Thank you. It comes with age, I suppose, Grand said pleasantly. So, tell me about yourselves. I can make out your shapes, but I don't recognize your voices. They brought us some gifts, Grand. They're the Davenports. His eyes lingered on Ellie as a look passed between them. Haven bit back a smile. Ellie seemed as smitten with Luke as she was with Wyatt. Love at first sight. Well, who was she to judge? Jules's expression remained blank, her aged hands threading absently through the afghan. Remember the company where I did my internship, Frontline Medical Supply? Grand smiled. Oh, yes, I remember. She looked at Haven, Wyatt, and Ellie. That was very kind of you. Her face shone with excitement, reminding Haven of a kid on Christmas Eve. What did you bring us? Haven suppressed a shiver. There was a fire burning in the fireplace, but the room still felt drafty even with the coat on. She felt for Luke and his grandmother, wondering what their story was. She got the feeling it was just the two of them. Luke seemed well-spoken. He'd done an internship, meaning he'd gotten an education. A small tree stood in the far corner with a few strands of thin garland and a handful of plastic ball ornaments. There was no tree skirt or presents. Wyatt glanced at her. Are you okay? I'm good, she answered with a reassuring smile. Luke went to the door, picked up the box, and carried it back into the living room. Wyatt moved to stand. Oh, don't worry, I've got it, Luke said. He placed it on the floor. Would you mind helping me remove the items? He asked Ellie. A smile ruffled her lips. Sure. Ellie got down on her knees beside the box and began removing the contents. As she did so, Luke called them out to Jules. A ham? Chocolate? When all the unwrapped items were removed, Ellie pulled out the wrapped box. It was covered in red and gold striped paper, a gold bow tied around it. Anticipation sounded in Ellie's voice as she handed the box to Luke. You should open it. All right. He looked at Haven and Wyatt. It was really kind of you to do this for me and Grand. Yes, it was, Jules said. Actually, it was my dad who chose you, Ellie explained. She offered a gentle smile. See, he did know who you were after all. Luke's eyes misted as he nodded. Thanks, he croaked, swallowing to hide the emotion. He tugged on the bow to untie it before ripping off the paper. Haven leaned forward, excitement creeping over her. She had a sneaking suspicion about what was in the box. Sure enough, Luke pulled out a star made of cut glass. He held it up, examining it. It's beautiful. He handed it to Jules. She stared intently through her glasses, particularly the telescopic lenses. It's a star. Yes, for the tree, Ellie exclaimed. Thank you, Luke laughed, although I think it might be a little large for our tree. He looked at the tiny tree, which looked pitiful compared to the intricate star. It's okay, Ellie assured him. You can place it in the center of your kitchen table instead. Luke nodded. Ellie reached in the box and pulled out an envelope. Don't forget this. Luke opened the envelope. It's a poem about the star, Ellie said. He unfolded the paper and began reading silently. It's beautiful, he said softly. What does it say? Jules asked. Before he could read it, Ellie interrupted him. Wait a minute. She reached in the box. There's another envelope here. She handed it to Luke. Okay. Luke used the side of his finger as a letter opener as he ran it under the top of the envelope. He pulled out the contents. His eyes widened the second before they filled with tears. It's a check for $35,000. He coughed and then laughed. His hand went to his mouth as he shook his head in disbelief. He looked down. There's a note. It says, for the macular degeneration surgery. What? Jules exclaimed in surprise, tears glistening in her eyes. This is wonderful, Luke choked, pinching the corners of his eyes. When he gained control of his emotions, he looked at Wyatt, Haven, and Ellie like they were angels. I don't know how we can ever thank you. Tears brimmed in Haven's eyes. This is what Christmas was about, giving and caring. She looked at Wyatt, who also had tears in his eyes. No thanks necessary, Wyatt said gruffly. Luke sprang from his seat and threw his arms around Jules, both wept like babies, their shoulders shaking. We can get your surgery. He turned to face them, mopping his eyes. I'm sorry. He let out a half sniff, half laugh, wiping his hands on his jeans. The doctors are confident they can repair Grand's eyes, but because of her age, the insurance company refused to pay for the surgery. Luke looked up at the ceiling, biting down on his lip to stay the emotion. This is the greatest gift anyone has ever given us. Thank you." Luke's lower lip quivered. "Thank you from the bottom of my heart." Haven felt a burst of joy as her eyes met Wyatt's. "Thank you for letting me be a part of this," she breathed. A warm, wide smile appeared on his face. "I wouldn't have had it any other way. You belong here with us, with me," he finished softly. "Yes, I do," she said simply, snuggling into him. That was really touching. Oh. When I first wrote this book, one of my editors said, "Seriously? You had a guy greet them with a shotgun? Where do you come up with these things?" And then I had to kind of laugh and say, "Well, I know I live in the suburbs now, but I grew up way out in the country in Alabama. And let me tell you, if somebody's packages were getting taken from their front porch, you'd better believe that people would take extreme measures to protect them." So for me, that was just normal. But I guess it is different for other people. I love how Charles wanted to help Luke's grandmother get her surgery. Oh my goodness, that is going to be a game changer for them. I love how Charles is so connected with people, and even this guy who did an internship with this company. I love that. Helping others is the heart of Christmas. It just brings a warm spirit that you can't get any other way. It's neat to see the budding attraction between Ellie and Luke. Okay, now that Wyatt and Haven are fake engaged, things are bound to get even more complicated. Join me tomorrow for the next chapter. Here's to keeping it sweet and swoony. See y'all tomorrow.